McLovin?
I am McLovin.
Imagine if Elden Ring released with two completely different stories and worlds. If you had a PS4 or Xbox One, you would get one world and story. And if you had a PS5 or Xbox X, you'd get another. That's effectively what happened when Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Double Agent released for all consoles and PC in late 2006 to early 2007. There were two versions of the game with different stories and different levels. One of these versions was released as a buggy and sometimes unplayable mess. This is the story of Splinter Cell Double Agent, a game caught between two console generations and two identities. To understand what happened with Double Agent, we need to understand the impossible position Ubisoft found themselves in after Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. That game, released in 2005, was a critical masterpiece loved by gamers. Many still consider it to be the pinnacle of the franchise. But Ubisoft Montreal, the team that created Sam Fisher, was done. They'd told their story, closed out their trilogy, and the studio was shifting focus to massive next-gen projects like the one that would eventually become Assassin's Creed. The problem? That new console generation, the Xbox 360 and PS3, was launching, and Ubisoft needed a Splinter Cell game ready to go for both generations. So they had a choice. If they develop one game across both generations, one will certainly be inferior to the other, or they could make two games. The best game they could for the PS2 and Xbox, and another for the PS3 and Xbox 360. And let's keep in mind that these were huge technological leaps between generations. Ubisoft, a company known for pitting studios against each other, put together some general requirements and story beats, and assigned Montreal to make a Splinter Cell game for the current or 6th-gen consoles. For PC and 7th-gen consoles, they asked Shanghai to take on the game. For this version, Shanghai decided to take Splinter Cell in a significantly different direction. They wanted cinematic action, daylight missions, and a focus on the psychological stress of being a double agent. This is version 1. Version 2, the current-gen version for Xbox, PS2, GameCube, and Wii, stayed with Ubisoft Montreal. They kept the Chaos Theory engine, the shadow-focused stealth, and the simulation-heavy gameplay. This was classic Splinter Cell. Some even called it Splinter Cell Chaos Theory 2. The version we're focusing on in this retrospective is Shanghai's version 1 for the PlayStation 3, and it had a rough road. The PS3's cell processor was notoriously difficult to work with, especially for third-party developers in 2007. And so Ubisoft Annecy and Ubisoft Milan were brought in to help with the PS3-specific work, including exclusive multiplayer content and 6-axis motion controls. But despite the extra time, the technical issues were never fully resolved. Ultimately, the ghosts of this bifurcated development would haunt the franchise. Even though Ubisoft Montreal would take the reins back for the next game, players were left wondering which Double Agent version was real. That question wouldn't be fully answered until the sequel, Conviction, directly referenced very specific events that took place only in Shanghai's version 1. If you want to watch a granular deep dive into the differences between version 1 and version 2, I'll link to a brilliant video by Hypertension Films in the description. The story of Double Agent is presented as the darkest chapter in Sam Fisher's life, and it's built around a single brutal, inciting incident. The game opens with a mission in Iceland. Sam is mentoring a rookie NSA agent named John Hodge at a geothermal plant. In the Shanghai version, Hodge is eager but reckless. He ignores a direct order to wait for backup, rushes in, and gets himself killed almost immediately. It sets the tone. This is a game about failure and loss. But the real heartbreak happens at the end of the mission. Colonel Irving Lambert, Sam's handler, mentor, and closest thing to a friend, delivers the news that will shatter Fisher's world. His daughter Sarah has been killed by a drunk driver. This is the emotional singularity the entire game orbits. The game clearly wanted you to feel this moment deeply, but for me, it was a shocking moment I was witnessing rather than a loss I was feeling. So, like the mensch he is, Lambert offers Sam an undercover assignment. Not because Sam is the best man for the job, but because Sam is broken enough to take it. The mission becomes grief therapy, or, worst-case scenario, a kind of suicide by proxy. Sam's task is to infiltrate a domestic terrorist group called John Brown's Army, or JBA, named after the American abolitionist. To get in, he's sent to Ellsworth Penitentiary to befriend Jamie Washington, a high-ranking JBA member. After orchestrating a prison riot and escape, Sam is inducted into the group and begins operating out of their headquarters in New York City. The JBA isn't your generic terrorist faction. They are ideologues led by Emile Dufresne, a calculating strategist who genuinely believes he's resetting a corrupt America. There's Carson Moss, the paranoid head of security who constantly suspects Sam. Then there's Enrica Villablanca, the medical officer and bomb maker whose love for Sam is mercilessly exploited. In my opinion, she's the game's best written and most complex character. She is a victim of manipulation and has genuine affection for Sam, which makes his exploitation of her emotionally uncomfortable in exactly the way the writers wanted.
Mixing business and pleasure can be truth.
This is in stark contrast with how Sarah's death was handled, which was emotionally meh. Anyway, once Fisher establishes himself in the JBA, the game switches between two structures: field missions and headquarter missions. Field missions send Sam around the world where he carries out operations for his new terrorist homies while quietly sabotaging them for the NSA. Headquarter missions take place inside the JBA compound, where Sam sneaks around gathering intel while avoiding detection by the very people he's pretending to help. Throughout all of this, you're balancing trust between John Brown's army and the NSA. Speaking of trust me when I say this is where some major endgame spoilers begin. So if you want to experience the story with unsullied eyes, skip ahead to the gameplay section. The entire narrative leads to JBA Headquarters Part 4. Emile captures Lambert and forces Sam into the ultimate ultimatum: execute the director of Third Echelon to prove your loyalty, or shoot Jamie Washington and destroy your cover. Technically, the game gives you a choice, but history made the choice for us. For the sequel, Splinter Cell Conviction, Ubisoft canonized this version, the darkest possible timeline. They confirmed that the New York setting, the interrogation room, and the bullet Sam puts in his best friend, that is the official history. This is the trauma that breaks Sam Fisher and sends him rogue, and thus the cruel irony of Double Agent. The inferior technical port contains the canonical DNA of the franchise, while the superior Montreal version on the PS2 and Xbox was narratively orphaned, which means this buggy, stuttering PS3 disc is a historically essential glorified coaster, because without these specific events, the emotional arc of the modern Sam Fisher simply doesn't exist. In Ubisoft Shanghai's version 1 of Double Agent, the gameplay represents a radical departure from the pure stealth simulation of chaos theory. The centerpiece of this design is the trust meter. Complete an objective for the JBA and their trust meter goes up. Fail an objective and trust goes down. Same principle applies for the NSA. This system had potential, but it had a critical flaw: you could farm trust. The other major change was the removal of the classic light meter, a gradual indicator showing exactly how exposed you were. But this was 2006, and the industry was moving toward cleaner, more minimal HUDs. And Ubisoft wanted to be like the cool kids, so they replaced the gradual meter with a binary visibility indicator on Sam's suit: green for hidden, yellow for exposed, and red for detected. But there was no in-between. You were either safe or you weren't. This shift was necessitated by levels like Kinshasa and Cozumel, where shadows barely exist. Stealth became about line-of-sight management and social stealth. But on PS3 specifically, this system was plagued by inconsistency. Due to rendering issues and lighting bugs, you'd sometimes be detected while visually appearing to be in cover. Players couldn't trust the simulation, which is not good for a stealth game. The PS3 version also featured exclusive 6-axis motion controls. These were marketed as immersive features, but in practice they were just bad. Level design generally favored cinematic verticality over the horizontal sprawl of chaos theory. The Shanghai mission in particular is a standout. Rappelling down a massive skyscraper during a fireworks display is visually spectacular but strictly linear. Kinshasa tries to create a war zone feel with crossfire and explosions, but you're often funneled down a single corridor of cover. The creative freedom that defined previous Splinter Cell games was mostly gone. The headquarter missions acted as the game's dungeons, restricted area puzzles where Sam navigates the JBA base under time limits while Emile or Moss is distracted. These sections are tense the first time through, but become repetitive as you memorize guard patrols. For better or worse, Double Agent wasn't trying to be Chaos Theory. It was trying to be a new stealth action hybrid. But in 2007, as an early title that was never patched on the PS3, with frame rates in the teens to low 20s and inconsistent stealth mechanics, it made me want to throw my controller in the ocean. Think what you will about Ubisoft, but the sheer number of people with real creative talent is enormous. For this retrospective, though, we're zeroing in on version 1's design director, Craig Lee. Lee's path to Double Agent was a storied one. His fascination with games began in 1978, the first time he played combat on the Atari 2600. By the mid-1990s, he'd broken into the industry the hard way, starting in QA at a time when formal game design roles barely existed. Designers, as we understand them today, simply weren't part of the standard development pipeline yet. After working in production roles at Warner Interactive, GT Interactive, and Activision, Lee co-founded his first studio, Blue 52, in 1999. Over the next 4 years, the studio grew to roughly 85 people across 4 teams, producing more than 20 original concepts and licensed designs. But by the early 2000s, shifting exchange rates and rising development costs made game development in the UK increasingly unsustainable. These conditions forced difficult decisions across the industry, including Lee's departure from the studio that he helped build. That moment led to one of the most dramatic pivots of his career and further defined his journeyman ethos. Lee sold all his stuff and relocated to China to join Ubisoft Shanghai as a creative director. There, he worked on 2 of the publisher's most important franchises. He first served as creative director on Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, and then stepped into Splinter Cell Double Agent as design director. Following Double Agent, Lee packed up again and returned to the UK. His career would continue to span wildly different scales of game development, from the creation of Fat Princess to his role guiding dozens of XBLA titles, and eventually to Mojang Studios, where he now serves as principal design director, working across the Minecraft universe. In later interviews, he's spoken fondly about his time at Microsoft's Xbox Live Arcade, describing it as one of his favorite periods precisely because of its constant creative motion, bouncing between radically different projects in a single day. One morning might be spent on Mark of the Ninja, the afternoon on State of Decay. And among all of them, he's singled out Ori and the Blind Forest as a project that was especially meaningful to him. New games shipped every couple of weeks. It's a career defined less by destinations than by motion, always moving toward the next idea, the next problem, the next version of what games could be. Matching the established and confusing pattern of Double Agent, the soundtrack was split between 2 musical identities. For version 1, Ubisoft brought in Michael McCann, credited here under the alias Behavior, to score all the gameplay sections. Known for his signature blending of organic and electronic elements, this was his breakout role in the video game industry. And the work he did here laid the foundation for his later iconic score for Deus Ex Human Revolution, which earned him a BAFTA nomination for original music. For the main cinematic score and cutscenes used in both versions, veteran composers Sasha Dikisian and Chris Velasco stepped in. Dikisian, known as Sonic Mayhem, built his reputation composing for Quake 2 with an industrial electronic score, while Velasco came from a classical background with credits on the God of War series. Double Agent was Velasco and Dikisian's first major franchise collaboration, the project that effectively launched their long-running partnership. They would go on to score Mass Effect 2 and 3, Tron Evolution, and, as we covered in our prototype retrospective, they later composed the underrated soundtrack for that game as well.
My name is Sam Fisher. I used to be a hero.
Sam Fisher was voiced by the inimitable Michael Ironside, returning to the role he'd defined since the original Splinter Cell. By this 4th installment, Ironside had established complete ownership of the character, but Double Agent required a different emotional range. With the story centered on Fisher processing his daughter's death, Ironside moved beyond the stoic, cynical military operator of earlier games. He brought a weary, volatile edge, the sound of a man who genuinely has nothing left to lose. Ironside was never just a voice actor for the series. He helped reshape Sam Fisher from day one. He famously rejected the original flat script for Splinter Cell and pushed for more humanity. That influence is clearest in Double Agent, where the dialogue reflects a darker, more personal internal conflict. His gravelly, intimidating delivery became so synonymous with the franchise that his absence in later titles, most notably Blacklist, sparked major backlash from fans and critics alike. Outside of games, Ironside is a legendary character actor. His film roles include the telepathic Daryl Revock in Scanners, Jester in Top Gun,
You can run, you can't hide.
and the ruthless Richter in Total Recall. He also played squad leader Gene Razak in Starship Troopers, a role that shares at least a little DNA with Sam Fisher's military persona. In the gaming world, Ironside voiced General Jack Granger in Command & Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars, Commander Mason in sci-fi horror Run Like Hell, and reprised Fisher in cameo appearances for Ghost Recon Wildlands and Breakpoint. He also voiced Darkseid in LEGO DC Supervillains, a role echoing his celebrated performance as the same character in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited. Don Jordan is the definitive voice of Colonel Irving Lambert, Sam Fisher's commanding officer, conscience, and moral anchor throughout the franchise. In Double Agent, Jordan's performance is particularly crucial. Where Lambert once served mainly as calm logistical support, Double Agent forces the character into conflict, desperation, and ultimately betrayal. Keith Sarabica voices Emile Dufresne, the leader of the JBA. Unlike the high-tech geopolitical villains of previous Splinter Cell games, Sarabica plays Emile as grounded, charismatic, and ruthlessly ideological. Sarabica is also one of gaming's most prolific and recognizable voice actors. Fallout fans know him as Joshua Graham, the Burned Man of New Vegas. Mass Effect fans know him as Harbinger, Halo players know him as the Didact, and detective game fans know him as Herschel Biggs from LA Noire. His film and TV career is just as stacked. He played Detective Gerard Stevens in The Dark Knight, Mickey Kostmeyer in the 1980s Equalizer series, and vampire hunter Daniel Holtz in, let's be honest, one of the best shows ever written for television, Angel. The marketing for Splinter Cell Double Agent on PlayStation 3 was built around a simple pitch: you're getting more. The headline feature was the introduction of a female spy for the Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer mode. This was marketed as the first playable female character in Splinter Cell multiplayer. The PS3 version also launched with 2 exclusive multiplayer maps not released on the 360. A Kinshasa Warzone map and a third echelon base map full of tight corridors and high-tech environments. Beyond the exclusive content, Ubisoft emphasized the 6-axis motion controls for lockpicking, hacking, and swimming. These were positioned as leveraging the PS3's revolutionary motion tech. But in practice, it was revolutionarily bad. The reality, as players would quickly discover, was that the extra content came bundled with a much buggier game. On Metacritic, the PS3 version sits around 78, a generally favorable score, respectable but noticeably lower than the Xbox 360 version's 85. User scores tell the same story at 6.3. Players admired the ambition but were rightfully unforgiving of the technical issues. The game targeted 30 frames per second, but routinely dipped into the low 20s, and sometimes the teens, during scenes with smoke, fire, or wide outdoor vistas. For a stealth game that relies on precision timing and careful aim, this was brutal, and visually, the PS3 release was a mixed bag. Some lighting effects did look better than the 360 version due to different rendering priorities, but textures were often lower resolution. In the years since, the PlayStation 3 version has cemented itself as the inferior way to experience version 1 of Double Agent. The community consistently recommends the Xbox 360 version, now backward compatible on modern Xbox systems with performance improvements, or the PC release. The PS3 port is usually described as only worth playing for completionists or those curious about its exclusive multiplayer content. The exclusive maps and the female spy were genuinely solid additions, and Spies vs. Mercs actually ran better than single player. But today the official servers are long gone, so yeah, just play a different port. Like most of the games I've covered so far, Splinter Cell Double Agent for the PS3 is an easy find. Its reputation as a subpar port keeps prices somewhat low on the secondary market. Price-wise, there isn't much difference between formats. Disc-only copies tend to run about $10. A complete-in-box copy is usually $10 to $15, and a sealed copy hovers around $20. That's about as flat as a pricing curve gets. There's also no special edition to hunt down for the PS3 in North America. The Xbox 360 got a limited collector's edition with a steelbook and a bonus documentary DVD, but the PS3 release was strictly standard. If you're a console enthusiast picking this up to actually play it, just get the Xbox 360 version instead if you can. It runs better, looks better, and is backward compatible on modern Xbox consoles with dramatically improved performance. But if you're specifically interested in documenting the pinnacle of PS3's early third-party misery, then go ahead and burn that $20. So, where does that leave us with Splinter Cell Double Agent on the PS3? Play the game on Xbox 360 and you get a polished, high-tech thriller. It runs smoothly, it looks great, and it feels like a proper blockbuster. But the PlayStation 3 version? This is the version that brings you closer to Sam Fisher. A brother in arms, if you will. You see, the story of Double Agent is about frustration. It's about fighting a system that's actively working against you. It's about trying to do your job while everything around you collapses. On Xbox, you're merely watching Sam suffer. You're a spectator. On the PlayStation 3, you're suffering with him. When the frame rate tanks during a gunfight, you really feel Sam's desperation. When the stealth mechanics glitch out and expose you for no reason, you feel the unfairness of his situation. When the controls fight you, you feel the exhaustion of a man who just wants to go home and eat some Twinkies. The Xbox 360 version is a video game. The PS3 version is method acting. But seriously, man, don't play this version. Play any Xbox version. Play the PC version. Play the PS2 version. But if you do find yourself suffering through the PlayStation 3 port, just tell yourself what I told myself. I'm not dropping frames, I'm building character. As always, thanks for watching this retrospective on Splinter Cell Double Agent. You guys rock! If you've played any of the Splinter Cell games, let me know in the comments which was your favorite. And it would help me a ton if you would like, subscribe, and click the little bell thingy. Catch you on the flip side.